Welcome to Breakthrough Ideas in the Spotlight. Today I have with me Mary Holland FioRito. She is the Ethics and Public Policy Center Cardinal Francis George Fellow. She is an attorney, a public speaker, and a commentator on issues involving women's leadership in the Catholic Church, work-life balances for mothers, and the Catholic Church administration. Her interests include human life issues, primarily abortion, post-abortion, aftermath, and contraception. After she received her Juris Doctorate degree from Loyola University School of Law in 1993, the late Joseph Cardinal Bernardine selected her as the Director of Pro-Life Activities for the Archdiocese of Chicago, which is the third largest Catholic diocese in the United States and home to more than 2.5 million Catholics. She's responsible for all the activities related to abortion, post-abortion counseling, assisted suicide, and euthanasia. Ms. FioRito worked in various capacities for the Catholic Church for many years, including serving as the Archdiocese of Chicago's first female vice chancellor. She was promoted in 2003 to the executive assistant to the late Francis Cardinal George, a role she has held until the time of the Cardinal's death in April 2015. Welcome to the program, Mary. We are going to get into it today about some important issues. You're going to hear about legislation that's been filed in the state of Illinois that is anti-life and really very concerning to everybody. And then we're going to get into a little bit of stuff about the Vatican at the very end and their invitation of, believe it or not, Chelsea Clinton. I find that just appalling, but we'll have a discussion about that. So, Mary, I'm going to hand it over to you now if you want to make some opening remarks about it and maybe an update on your bio if I missed anything.
Well, thank you, Jeannie. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm a long admirer of yours, and this is really great to be able to have this conversation. I'm really excited for your new venture here. This is terrific to be able to sit down and talk about topics like this in depth. I think is going to be such a help to the citizens of Illinois in particular. So, so I have, after Cardinal George passed away, I left the Archdiocese and went to the Ethics and Public Policy Center, which is a think tank located in Washington, D.C., although I work here from the Chicago area. And I'm also a fellow at the DeNicola Center for Ethics and Culture at the University of Notre Dame. And primarily my work has been focused on abortion law and abortion policy and how that impacts not only women specifically, but also young girls and families.
Well, let's get right into that because State Representative Anna Mueller this year she filed legislation, HB 1797. Not that that's important to everybody, but if you're looking up legislation, it is HB 1797. She's the chief sponsor of a bill to repeal parental notification of abortion. So in Illinois, it's not that you have to have parental permission if you're a minor to have an abortion. You just have to notify them. And yet Anna Mueller wants to put girls' health at risk by saying that they don't even have to notify their parent at all. I mean, what is she thinking? We know that most people do not agree with this position. Even pro-choice people, 58% of them in recent polling, have said that they think parents should be notified.
Right. Yeah. In fact, the Terrence Group poll that was taken just about a month ago showed that only 22% of registered voters in the state of Illinois want to see our parental notice law overturned. And while it does have sort of abortion as its, contours, I guess, as a bill, this really is a bill about parental rights. I mean, you're a mom, I'm a mom, I have 3 teenage daughters. One of my daughters just had her ears pierced, and we went out to the Oak Brook Mall to get that done, and she picked out her little studs, and I had to sign permission forms in triplicate. And then a form indicating that I understood that there were risks, even with something as sort of everyday as an ear piercing, and what to do should she develop an infection. I mean, and yet Anna Mueller and others in the Illinois General Assembly want to take away parental notification for abortion, which can be done either surgically or more and more often these days through the use of abortion pills, both of which have or can have dramatic side effects. In fact, we remember from the case of Tanya Reeves, the beautiful young African-American woman, while not a minor, was only 24, died after having a second trimester abortion at Planned Parenthood's clinic in downtown Chicago. So we know women can suffer everything from uterine perforation to incredible hemorrhaging. And that, again...
And then the psychological backlash too.
Correct. And one of the experts that we have brought in to hopefully testify before the General Assembly is a neurological psychologist who studies teenage brain development. And part of the testimony she's hoping to offer is to show you, I mean, anybody who has a teenager knows that those frontal lobes aren't working exactly correct, and I have a daughter who dyed her hair yesterday a different color. And I found out about it when I found the hair color box inside the garbage can. So and we know that they don't have proper impulse control probably until their early 20s, which is of course why car insurance rates, for example, are
you can't even rent a car till you're 25.
Correct.
I mean, think about it. You can't give your child can't take a Tylenol that you gave them in the morning and kept in their lunchbox for if they have a headache. At age 14, they can't even do that. They're not supposed to, at least.
That's true. They cannot even self-administer over-the-counter meds at school. Those have to be kept with the school nurse with written permission from the parent.
Now, apparently, in a public address where she was on some Zoom interview with a pro-abort group, Anna Muller herself, who is the mother of 2 daughters, said that she would want to know as a parent if her daughters were going to get an abortion. So she's really kind of a hypocrite on this bill. It makes no sense to me at all. This is really about parental rights. And so if you're in Anna Muller's district, which is District 43 up around the Elgin, Carpentersville area, you should contact Anna Muller's office and tell her to back away from this bill. It's harmful for women. It protects sex traffickers, potentially. There could be a lot of fallout medically, and parents deserve to know the health status of their children at all times for every procedure.
Right. Well, I'm glad, Jeannie, that you raised the issue of sex trafficking, because we've been accused by the pro-abortion side of using scare tactics when we bring up that particular issue. But I've had the privilege now of speaking with and working alongside some sex trafficking survivors and also experts who have, again, are prepared to give testimony before our General Assembly. One of them, Dr. Brooke Bello, was, just a remarkable woman who was given, by the way, a Lifetime Achievement Award by President Obama for her work. She founded an organization called More to Life, which is to help rehabilitate those who have been sex trafficked, both young men and young women. But we know that about 70% of those who are sex trafficked as minors are minor girls. Dr. Bello was raped when she was 11. And was trafficked through most of her minor years. She was brought multiple times to abortion clinics by her traffickers. And I'm a pretty, I've done this work a long time. In fact, I first started working on the Illinois Parental Notice Bill when I was a young lawyer just out of law school. So that shows you how long I've been around this issue. And even I lost my composure listening to her. She said, if one of those abortion clinics, just one of them, had to call my mom or my dad, my mom might have known where I was. She might have found out what city I was in. She might have found out the name of the street that I was on. They might have been able to find me. I mean, I don't know how any parent, mom or dad, could listen to that and not just have that move them and understand that this bill is critical. It is a layer of protection for children who are sex trafficked.
And sex trafficking, by the way, does not just happen in some foreign country, some at a border town or anything like that. It is right in our midst in the suburbs. Breakthrough Ideas just hosted Reclaim 13, which is another organization that helps women who have been sex trafficked. And the particular people we talk to run the house that they have for women from ages 10 to 17. And they are operating in the suburbs to help these women who have been sex trafficked, or girls, really girls. These are still girls, young girls. And so, you're right. Many times they need to be saved by some adult. She recounted one story where the woman was just so thankful that the police officer happened to know that her pimp was, driving with a bad tail light, and that's what saved her, because they came up to the car and realized what was going on here. And so it's all those chance meetings with other adults, which would happen at an abortion clinic, which is why you have to have parental notification. This is outrageous.
And again, as you point out, this is not consent. This is not a parent giving permission. This is simply notification by the abortion provider, not by the child, but by the abortion provider 48 hours in advance. that the minor is going to be having either a surgical or a chemical abortion performed on this. So this will not affect abortion access. It will not affect abortion law in Illinois. And we have about the most extreme abortion law in the country next to New York. I think they're the only ones that outpace us at this point. But you would well know, Jeannie, that in the last 4 years, Planned Parenthood, which is the nation's largest provider of abortion, has opened 3 new clinics, one on the Illinois side of the Missouri border, one on the Illinois side of the Indiana border, and one on the Illinois side of the Wisconsin border, all within 15 minutes of those.
That's right, just outside of East St. Louis.
And the other one in Flossmoor, which is a majority minority community, by the way, and then back up in Waukegan, which again is a majority minority community. They are preying on minorities for abortion provision. Once we pass taxpayer funding of abortion by Rauner's hand, by the way, and put that into law in 2017, Planned Parenthood announced they were going to open up 5 new abortion clinics. And what Anna Muller is doing is she's listening to Planned Parenthood, who funds her campaigns, and not listening to her constituents, who the majority of them are minority members. They're Hispanic. They're largely Hispanic that live up in her district. They have no idea what she's doing, and she's hurting them and their pro-family values. And we need them to wake up, because they can take her out of office next time. And I hope the hell they do, because this is terrible legislation in a state with some of the most extreme abortion laws in the nation, by the way. And when you see our states around us, like Iowa, go into a heartbeat bill, we are so far afield. We are such an outlier when it comes to this for a Midwest state. It's unbelievable. And it's immoral.
Right. You're right. Immoral. We don't acknowledge the science of unborn human life. I have a nephew who was born at 22 weeks at Loyola University's Medical Center and is a happy and healthy toddler today. 22 weeks, 0 days. And if you just Google abortion in Illinois, you'll see that the majority of the clinics offer elective, which means healthy mom, healthy baby, elective abortions right up until the end of the 24th week. And it's the abortionist who gets to make that time determination. So they could even be later. But, you go to the NICU down at Lurie, you go to the NICU at Loyola, and they have regularly now saved babies at 21, 22, 23 weeks gestation as time and science advance. Sandra Day O'Connor, of all people, who was more or less a pro-abortion Supreme Court justice, said, Roe versus Wade is on a collision course with itself, because as science develops and, the age of fetal viability goes down, Roe becomes a more and more outdated and inhumane law, which is what it is. And to see Illinois promoting it, and I know that you are always so good about pointing out the way taxpayers in Illinois are taking advantage of it every turn. Well, because of presumed eligibility in Medicaid, you are able to come over the Illinois border and to get a free abortion here if you would be eligible for Medicaid in your own state. So not only can pimps bring young women over the border into Illinois from Wisconsin or Indiana or Missouri or wherever, but we'll be paying for those abortions. And there's no legal limit, right, Jeannie. There's no limit legally on the number of abortions you can have. Brooke Bello talks, she is infertile now because she was forced by her traffickers to undergo so many abortions as a teenager. She can no longer have her own children, even though she's in a beautiful, wonderful, happy marriage now. And that is, that's the after effects she will now carry. She'll never have her own children or grandchildren biologically, and it's a heartbreak for her. So this is not technically, as much as I would like to argue that it is an abortion issue. This is about the rights of us as moms and dads to know what is happening to our children's
health.
It is about the rights of Illinois taxpayers not to be paying for abortions for people out of state, and it is about protecting vulnerable young women who are being trafficked. That's what this bill is about. And, that is what Anna Muller and those who are intending to try to manipulate people into thinking it's about abortion access do not believe those lies. That is not what this bill is about.
No, the Democrats are good at lying, though. They will lie straight to your face. They do not care. She's lied about a number of issues. This is one of many of them. And I'm not afraid to call them out for what they are. So moving on, because you talk about this promotion of abortion, it's getting worse. Let me tell you, there's another bill called the REACH Act, which is 1736. It's by Kathleen Willis. She's another, extreme Democrat, but represents the suburbs really. And she is filing a bill that requires comprehensive sex education in all public schools. Right now, it's optional, but this bill would require comprehensive sex ed in all public schools, starting at kindergarten, to the point where by the time you graduate from 8th grade, you need to understand what masturbation is. And by the time you are in high school, some of the videos that we have previously shown folks, and we are going to continue to show up folks as we go on, but they are very aggressive videos. I think they're porn. I think they are sexual harassment, because remember, the definition of sexual harassment is anything that makes you uncomfortable as it pertains to sex. So an off-color joke that was said, an email that was said, something that you don't find funny. Well, these, in many ways, these videos are very aggressive in what they show in terms of sex. And I'm talking about very aggressive. And that's sexual harassment. On top of it, your options, they talk specifically about your option for abortion. So they're promoting this promiscuity through comprehensive sex ed starting in kindergarten, when they start to define gender, and going all the way through high school, and then giving your options on abortion. I mean, this is all part, and by the way, this is a Planned Parenthood initiative. Again, these Democrat women don't care about women.
Well, right. And part of what this is meant to do is to desensitize children, right? To areas of sexual privacy, that they are not emotionally or psychologically ready to really absorb and understand as young people, and as people who are just starting to develop and whose bodies are just starting to change. And isn't that the same tactic that we're warned about in terms of grooming for sexual abuse, right? That's what an abuser does. He gradually reduces the child's natural inclination to keep private things private, and to undermine their modesty, the natural modesty that children tend to have about their private areas, and it undermines what parents try to do at home. I mean, the one thing I'm sure you had this talk with both your boys and your girls is that no one should ever touch you in certain areas or speak about those areas to you unless it's the doctor and mom or dad is in the room with you. There's nothing wrong. It's not dirty. It's just private, and we keep private things private. And to introduce those topics in such a way.
They introduce transgenderism. They introduce that you can have multiple identities, and we're talking, this is in 3rd to 5th grade.
Correct.
And it is a total desensitization of it. It is a grooming action, and I actually think that we should charge them as such. You're grooming kids.
Predatory grooming.
It is 100%.
And with the way in which we know the porn industry preys particularly on young boys. I mean, my husband does IT security, and he has told me stories that would stand your hair on end about the younger and younger ages at which now preteen and prepubescent boys can access porn on their phones. I have an acquaintance who's at her daughter's public school. There was 2 boys who came up to her daughter in the playground and started showing her a porn video about a rape fantasy, about a young girl being raped. These are the kind of things that kids have access to. And when they are simultaneously at school, as you mentioned, desensitized to the seriousness of taking advantage of someone sexually, or of touching them, or of harming them in any way sexually, the children are not only going to be confused, they are going to be far more vulnerable to sexual abuse and to sexual mistreatment. And porn is an incredibly addictive thing. And in fact, if I have a friend who's a PhD biologist from the University of Wisconsin, whose kind of prime area of study is the impact of looking at pornography on the male brain. And he will show you PET scans of male frontal lobes before and after they've looked at pornography. And it will literally leave holes in the frontal lobes of the male brain if they look at pornography for a long enough time. So this not only impacts the behavior of the male, because the more they look at porn, the more they have to look at more graphic stuff in order to have the same kind of reaction. but it has impacted marriages. I have a friend who does marriage counseling with people who cannot consummate their marriages because the male is so addicted to porn. He isn't able to do that unless he has, very graphic visual stimulation. And I'm sorry to be so graphic, but people need to know this is the end result of a culture that thinks that porn is no big deal, that telling kids about masturbation in third grade is no big deal. And again, I'm not. I was accused of being a prude by somebody one time. I thought, I'm married. I have children. That there's a healthy place for the use of intimacy in a marriage. But when we are trying to, there's a difference between explaining to children how their bodies work and what the proper names for their body parts are, if that's done in a way that's sensitive to the values of all the parents in the public schools, right? I have a friend who's a rabbi, and he was telling me when my children, from my congregation are told that they can choose their own gender and that gender is a construct, he said that directly is contradicting Genesis. What I tell them, during our Shabbat services about God creating man and woman in Genesis, they're directly contradicting me. It takes me weeks and sometimes months to undo the damage.
It has no place in the classroom.
No,
that's the whole deal. We don't need to discuss this in the classroom. The other thing that I found problematic with parts of the curriculum that I've looked at, parts of the bill, they always talk to finding the trusted adult in the school system to go to. Now, granted, there are some families where you may have some problems, but honestly, and in fact, my own school district basically said we want every child to have a trusted adult in the school to go to. I'm not sure I want that, honestly. I'm the trusted adult first and foremost.
And especially, after studies that we've seen that were funded by the No Child Left Behind Act, the studies that show the incidence of sexual abuse and sexual misconduct in the public school system.
Oh, well, Chicago had a huge story about that just years ago. Massive sex abuse.
And it was on the front page of the Tribune for a couple of days, and then it vanished.
Yes, exactly.
So the Tribune was terrific in breaking that story, but there was no follow-up. The Associated Press had sort of a national version of that, but again, I think it was in the news for maybe a day, and then it vanished. And I'm certainly not excusing sexual abuse by any member of the Catholic Church, but boy, that was front page news for years. I'm glad that it was. Catholic schools tend to be pretty much the safest place you can have your child these days. But what about all the other institutions where this is taking place? And
eventually it affects your own. You can't hide. You won't be able to hide in your own church environment and homeschool your kids with not eventually this public policy affecting you. If you run a big business, there's new legislation now saying that same-sex couples should have the opportunity for in vitro fertilization procedures paid for by their health insurance companies, and that it would be considered discriminatory for not to offer them. These types of treatments cost upwards of $20,000. But there's legislation filed by, I'm trying to find it. It's Representative Margaret Croak from Chicago. She introduced this bill to extend that protection to same-sex couples and the LGBTQ people. Not even couples, by the way, if you're single and you wanted to get in vitro fertilization. Current law basically says that you have to try to have unprotected sex for up to a year before qualifying to have IVF paid for by your health insurance company. Now, these types of slippery slope policies move into the business world, saying your health insurance company provided by your business, by your employer, would have to provide these types of benefits. I mean, where does this go? It's interesting.
One of the things we warned about when we redefined marriage, right? First in Illinois and then nationwide. At first, we were assured and told this will not impact anybody else, but same-sex couples who simply want to have the same kinds of, inheritance rights and hospital visitation rights, et cetera, et cetera. It won't affect religious people. It won't affect anyone's employment. And that's far from the case, as we see in a variety of different ways. Now, the reason that the law currently holds that you are entitled to certain fertility treatments after a year of intercourse without using any kind of contraceptives is because that means that either the male body or the female body is unhealthy in some way. because healthy, male and female coupling should result usually within a year with the conception of a child. And so that is a body that is not working in the way that it's normally supposed to. Therefore, that's what health insurance is for, right? To correct illnesses, and infertility would be an illness. That's not what the situation is here with two men or two women or three men and one woman or whatever, coupling or, grouping you want to have here. Two men, because marriage is not defined as a conjugal union anymore, which was always its definition in the law, right? And the only reason government cared to be involved because marriage was conjugal, children could result from that. And because of that, the state and the government wanted to tie biological men to their children to keep them responsible for them. And now we have marriage. It's just love is love. It's no longer conjugal. And of course, two men or two women cannot conceive a child. But that has nothing to do with their bodies not functioning in a healthy way. It has to do with the fact that it's biologically impossible. So now we have to pay for essentially what are elective procedures. And we don't pay for any other kind of elective procedures through our health insurance. It's going to send rates skyrocketing because, again, this is elective. It's very expensive. I think there was a Tribune article that talked about some IVF, procedures costing as much as six figures. And the other people who carry insurance and companies who help to subsidize it shouldn't have to pay for things that don't have to do with an unhealthy human body. They have to do with personal choices that people are making to electively engage in a surrogate or IVF or what have you. It's not discriminatory. That's not what health insurance was created for.
That's right.
That's exactly right. I mean, people have all sorts of elective surgery done to, get rid of wrinkles or whatever it might be. And we shouldn't have to pay for that. There's nothing unhealthy about that. It's just something you want to do. So this is, to me, I mean, the reason I bring that up is it's in the full context of what we're talking about, but it's also just another hit on business. So much of what we do that we think is no problem, actually, it ends up being a hit on business. And when you're as uncompetitive as the state of Illinois is from a business standpoint, and you've got people looking for other ways to find a better environment to move to, this is just one more hit on the business community, and that's why I bring that up. Moving on, one other thing that I found interesting, and maybe since you are very close to the Catholic Church leadership, you've been in touch with many of them. There's this interesting article in the Federalist that says Vatican invites abortion advocate Chelsea Clinton to talk about health and the soul. It says the Vatican's Pontifical Council for Culture is set to host Chelsea, Anthony Fauci, Deepak Chopra, and others for a May conference on the mind, body, and soul in its role in healthcare. What are we to make of this as Catholics? I'm a Catholic, you're a Catholic. I can think, I'd like to be invited to the Vatican and talk about health too, and the mind and the body. How come she gets to go and I don't?
Yeah, this is one of this puzzles practicing Catholics and particularly practicing people in healthcare to no end. As you're probably aware, in the United States and in many other countries, the Catholic Church is often the number one provider of healthcare services privately to the populations, and particularly to people of little to no income or to the impoverished. That's one of the things that we have always done, following Christ's example of healing the sick, right from the Gospels. So when, it often, I wonder why people, for example, like Chelsea Clinton, who through the Clinton Foundation, and of course her parents' positions on abortions are also very well known, but she herself, she shouldn't be fully responsible for what her parents think, but she has, absorbed those own positions and taken them on her own too. And to have we used to use a word, you probably remember this from your grade school days, because I think we're probably similar in terms of our age, causing scandal, which didn't have to do with somebody having an affair with someone. To cause scandal would be to lead someone to think that something that is wrong might be considered right under certain circumstances, right? So it's why Catholics, for example, are not supposed to go to same-sex weddings, because that can cause scandal. That can lead other people to say, well, Jeannie and her husband went to that wedding, so therefore they must think gay marriage is okay. There are certain things that we don't do because it can lead others into into misunderstanding something, into confusion, or even into outright sin. So I don't know who at that, it's kind of like watching the sausage being made, right? The Holy See or the Vatican is a fairly large organization of people who work, and there are different, pontifical committees that attempt to put together things that would be interesting and things that would maybe attract people who might not normally want to watch a Vatican conference on healthcare, right? But a lot of these people wouldn't be American. They wouldn't be sort of familiar with the context in which American Catholics would see this. And so therefore it is a cause of scandal. And frankly, I'd like to see them. I have a Dominican sister friend who's also a doctor who works in a clinic for the poor. I'd love to see her talk. I mean, she is the one who's doing the work, who has to implement it in her day-to-day life as a religious woman, as a Dominican sister. Rarely do you see, other than perhaps Dr. Fauci, who I know at least was raised a Catholic. I don't think he any longer professes the faith, but at least he was raised a Catholic and has some kind of sense of what it means to work in, epidemiology. Right. So I guess I don't agree with everything he says. I don't disagree with everything he says, but I could see his being chosen. But some of the others are just, I think, who is it? From one of the rock bands. I'm sorry, again, I'm dating myself.
I don't remember, but reading on, it basically said that they're partnering together to host the world's leading physicians, scientists, leaders of faith, atheists, patient advocacy, policymakers, philanthropists, and influencers to engage in powerful conversations on the latest breakthroughs in medicine, health, and care and prevention. So, so what's Hillary? Chelsea, is she a philanthropist? Is she an influencer? She's none of the other ones.
Maybe a little bit of both. The Clinton Foundation, I believe, is still operating, but perhaps not at the level it once was when her mother was still a candidate and a presidential hopeful. But I'm just glad Melinda Gates's name wasn't on there, because she actually does profess to be a Catholic and has done.
She does. I did not know that.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, in her book, I did a rather scathing review, if I do say so myself, of her book, where she spends 2 chapters justifying herself as a Catholic for doing the work that they're doing to put African women on implants and all sorts of other chemical.
So our big tent, is the Catholic religion a big tent? You work deeply in this. You're absolutely in the third largest diocese in the United States. It's very Catholic feeling here in the Chicagoland area. You've been close to a couple different cardinals now. Are we the big tent Catholics? Which that's fine. Everybody has their own individual faith with God, and we're all sinners. We all are. We understand that deeply. How far do we go with this? I'm curious.
Well, it would have been, less of a problem maybe 50 years ago, when people were much better catechized about their own Catholic faith. For example, there's been a recent Pew Research study that, who put something out on Twitter, was Richard Dawkins, about how the majority of Catholic people do not believe that Jesus Christ is truly present in the Eucharist, which would be the host, Holy Communion, for your non-Catholic viewers, Holy Communion that we receive as Catholics, which is why there's such, consternation over Joe Biden going to communion, because we don't believe that's a symbol. We believe that's actually the body and blood of Jesus when we go up there to receive. And therefore, for someone who, as St. Paul writes about in his letters, is objectively in a state of sin, as I think could be very easily argued given Joe Biden's executive orders on abortion. He doesn't just have an opinion. He actually took an action that will lead to the deaths of thousands of unborn children. So you have Catholics who at one time, 50 years ago, understood. So you could listen to a Deepak Chopra, right, and be like, okay, I understand where he is coming from his faith tradition, but I also know well what my faith tradition teaches and why we might part ways, but where I could find a kernel of truth in what he is saying from his. You have Catholics, I think it's upwards of 80% of Catholics now don't go to Catholic schools anymore. So they're largely educated through Saturday morning programs at their parishes, if they go at all. And so you have Catholics, as Richard Dawkins was only too happy to point out on Twitter last week, who don't believe in the very fundamental premises of Catholic Christianity. So therefore, when you're dealing with that kind of, population, yeah, you're a big tent, but how are you, how are you defining the tent covers? What I'd like to know, there's so many Catholics that just don't understand their faith completely. And if they did, I think polls would look different. I think conferences like this would look different. I think a lot would look different.
It was certainly, though, I mean, when you look back at the Catholic faith, it is a very rich faith. It is foundational to many countries. It is, I mean, when you look at what the Catholic faith has built just in the United States in terms of its school system, in terms of its healthcare system, isn't it that the Catholic faith delivers more American healthcare than almost any other grouping?
And we're the largest private provider of social services in the United States. So other than the government with your tax dollars, no one is providing more social services than the Catholic churches. So
and for that, we're
thankful and grateful. I just, I have my concerns. So,
but Jesus was not a social worker. Jesus did not come to be a social worker, as much as he was concerned about, the social well-being and the health of people. But he came to be a savior, and he came to give us a faith and to give us a relationship with him. And that has to motivate what we do, right? So you look at the Little Sisters of the Poor, who were so persecuted by the Obama administration. Now the Biden administration is going right back after them again. They serve the indigent, elderly poor with such dignity. If anyone's ever been to their homes in the Illinois area, in Lincoln Park and then in Palatine, you will not see a cleaner nursing home in your entire life, but B, a place where people are more loved and more deeply cared for, because those sisters, part of what they do, it's in their mission written down, we treat every person we care for as if it was Jesus. Absolutely. And we care for that person as if they were Jesus until Jesus calls them home. You will not find many nursing homes in the country that have that as their core mission. And so when we are trying to, as a country, undermine the work that those sisters are doing to make it so difficult for them, to make it difficult for Catholic schools to hire and fire according to mission, we are happy to let other people, to let them be, as we were told, again, to go back to the gay marriage issue. But then you cannot come into our institutions and tell us we must now change our teaching that we believe we received from Christ.
Yes, we're happy to live and let live. We really are. We understand we're a pluralistic society. We are a multidimensional, denominational society. We believe in freedom of religion, not freedom from religion, and we want to practice. The other side at this point is not happy to let live. Hey, we've gone a little bit long here, Mary. I'm going to end our conversation with you, but I want to get you back on and discuss H.R. 5, which passed the House again at the federal level. Hopefully the Senate keeps that closed down, because that is a huge detriment to religious liberty in this country, and nobody will be able to escape it if that does pass. So thank you so much for coming on In the Spotlight with Breakthrough Ideas. I appreciate your time today and your insight as a prominent Catholic atheist, and I appreciate you just being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeannie. It's been my pleasure, and I'd love to come back again.
Okay, terrific. Have a great day.
God bless, Jeannie.
God bless you.